My guest today is one of Hollywood's most successful screenwriters of all time, with billions of box office ticket sales associated with his films. Jurassic Park, Mission Impossible, Spider-Man are just three of more than 30 films that my guest has written. So let me welcome David Koepp to Molner's table. Did you know I had my own table, Dave?
I'm happy to be at it, John.
Before we start, I think we should provide, a disclaimer, because I've known you for a while.
I've never met you before in my life. I don't know what kind of game you're playing here. Yes, John, we've known each other. I would say I was probably 19 or 20. So it's a long time, John.
Why the decision now to start writing books, or a decision a couple of years ago when you wrote your first book, Cold Storage, and now again, following it up with your new book, Aurora?
You know, I'd kind of had it in the back of my mind that someday I got to write a book, someday I got to write a book. But my ideas always tend to show up as movies because that's just the medium I worked in for so long. And I started, I had this idea, which would become Cold Storage. And I started sitting down to just put a few sentences on paper about it, start thinking about the characters, and you just start writing sentences and see what comes out. And I wrote a paragraph and I thought, gee, that's a nice paragraph. Let me see if I can do another one of those. And after about a page and a half, I thought, hey, I could make this a short story. And then after about 10 or 20 pages, I thought, no, I could make it a novella, like 100 pages. And then after about 50 pages, I had to admit, no, this needs to be a novel, or should be a novel. And so I just kept going, and it was liberating and incredible fun.
Well, after all those years of writing those treatments and even as a successful screenwriter, having committees to answer to and others, you were finally really writing for yourself.
Yeah, that's the thing, is movies are just relentlessly collaborative endeavors. You're collaborated upon in movies. And the problem is, you need to ask somebody for millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars at some point. So you're gonna get a lot of input, and there's a lot of people to try to please.
Tell me about the idea behind Aurora, this power outage, this sort of doomsday scenario, a solar event. Why don't you tell people what the Carrington Event is that you opened the book by describing?
Well, I've been interested in the idea of powerlessness, both literal and figurative, for a long time. And I made a movie in the mid-90s about a power outage that was contained. Trigger effect. Yeah, you really only see these three people and what they do and what happens to them. But in researching that, I learned a bit about coronal mass ejections, which are a coronal mass ejection, which is a CME, that is a large amount of solar plasma that is, ejected from the sun's coronal layer regularly every day. But a solar flare will erupt and it'll send up this giant burst of electromagnetically charged plasma into space. And normally it heads off into space and nothing happens. Occasionally they hit Earth as a glancing blow, and they disrupt the magnetosphere a bit. Every couple hundred years, they hit Earth directly. And the last really major one was 1859, discovered, witnessed by a British astronomer named Carrington, so it was called the Carrington Event. And what happens is, when this mass of charged particles hits the Earth's magnetosphere, it completely it puts a surge of energy, electromagnetic energy, into the atmosphere that the planet absolutely can't deal with. Electrical systems on the planet as a whole, the natural planet, is fine. What the Carrington Event did, because it was 1859, is lit up the skies with the Aurora Borealis that you could see pretty much all over the Earth, all as far north from the South Pole as Colombia, as far south from the North Pole as Jamaica. The brilliant Aurora Borealis everywhere. And the only electrical system that was really in operation at the time was the telegraph system. They had a big problem. wires melted, signal boards, the
In
relay.
1859, it shut down.
Yeah, it shut it down for 3 days to 3 weeks, depending how long it took to repair. But most people thought it was just sort of this spectacular natural display, and it was fun. Since then, we've become completely dependent on electrical power. Everything in our world is wired into a grid, which means if another, CME were to hit the Earth's magnetosphere, it would enter the Earth and it would follow the line of every single wire on the planet and blow out anything plugged in completely. I mean, there's nothing that could withstand that amount of energy surging through it all of a sudden. So everything from a nuclear power plant to your coffee pot is not only going to go out, it's going to be fried and useless until you repair it.
So
Government studies have been done about this kind of catastrophic impact on critical infrastructure, that it would take 12 to 18 months to get the power systems back up and running.
and this is the setting for your book. So this event happens. We're not giving anything away here by saying this is what the story's set against. It's an act of God. It's not an act of terrorism.
Right. Which is one thing I liked about it. There isn't, a bad guy. Some people in the story behave badly because in crisis situations, I think we see it brings out the best and the worst in people. But this happened because we live in the universe. I want to write two parallel stories that converge. And I wanted one of the characters to be completely prepared for an event like this. Because there's a lot of people in the world who, enjoy prepping, and it's more than a hobby. The more you do it, the more you become convinced that this will be needed and that you have to be doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted someone who is quite wealthy and has the means to prep, extensively and try and plan for every contingency that could possibly go wrong. And then I wanted another character who had done absolutely nothing. After COVID, she bought a storage rack in her basement and she printed out a list of emergency supplies. And that's where it stayed. There's an empty rack and a list, and that's all she's done, because that's how most of us are. Even though we've been through COVID, we may have some extra paper towels in the garage, but most people are not prepared for any kind of massive interruption of their life.
But if you're a guy who's thinking about this stuff as much as you have, do you have extra canned goods in your basement?
No. And we still can't conceive of it, even though some really wild things have happened to us in the last, couple of years. You still don't quite conceive that it's going to happen. And also there's a human tendency and a governmental tendency to plan for the last crisis instead of anticipating the next one. So I think we're probably maybe we all have extra masks and COVID tests and we know what to do. And that
might not help us in the event of a CME is what you're telling me.
But it's not going to be that next time. It's going to be something else.
What is the plan of action from the United States government, or any government for that matter?
People are screaming for one, but there isn't one. We aren't really prepared for an extended grid shutdown. And we have a lot of trouble agreeing on plans as a nation right now. You saw in Texas's power outage last winter or winter before.
The one where Ted Cruz went on vacation.
Yeah, famously. How ill prepared we are for a grid shutdown. And it only gets worse every year as all our banking moves online, as everything we do is online.
I'm curious, how early in the writing process did it occur to you, I'm going to go with Aurora as a book title because of the reference to the solar event, and I'm going to set this in Aurora, the small town, because I want to focus on a character. Is that pretty early, or have you written the whole thing and then it sort of comes together?
No, that was really early. That was right away. I knew I wanted a Midwestern town that was of adequate size, that there could be some social, significant social disruption, but not Chicago. I didn't want millions of people. Aurora was just kind of irresistible because the sun's Aurora and the town of Aurora.
And David, doing my extensive research for this interview, I noticed it's being made into a movie. So it all comes full circle. And did you say you're writing the screenplay for the film, and you've hired a director, or a director has been assigned or hired?
The director hired us because I might say because it's Catherine Bigelow, who's just a brilliant film director, and Zero Dark 30 and Hurt Locker and many others. So she's I sent her the book because we'd spoken a few times over the years looking for something to do together. I admire her work, and I guess she thought I typed well. So I sent her an email and said, hey, I wrote this book and nobody else has read it, and I wonder if it might be up your alley. Take a look. And she really loved it, and so we sold it to Netflix, and hopefully we'll start shooting just after the first of the year.
And as you've talked to Catherine Bigelow about the book, does she see things differently in the film than the way you imagined it going to film, or have you not really?
Yes, she does, and that's good. That's what's supposed to happen. That's what a good director does. A not so good director just sort of records what you write down, and a very good director interprets that, and it has to become like something she'd make. And so I think the book, there's a lot of people sitting in rooms talking. There's a lot of people philosophizing because power's out for a long time and they have time on their hands. And that's, I think, terrific in a book. I think it makes it read very nicely. It gives us a lot of things to chew over and think about. But in a movie, it's not very exciting. So I'd say the movie version, though the book is tense, I think the movie version will be significantly more tense, which I think is fun.
It's pretty tense. I mean, I referenced at the top, your friend Brian De Palma said it's a page turner. It is, and it's suspenseful to the end, and you keep reading. It's a sort of book you want to go on and see what's going to happen next, because there's a lot of stuff happening while the power's out.
Yeah. Yes, there is. I mean, I like books that are hard to put down, and so I was trying to write one.